Hello, this is Gallifreyan Jedi, and I would like to welcome you to my YouTube channel. And I would like to start out by apologizing to everyone for the fact that this blog will not be on the topic that I had originally promised my viewers, which was supposed to be on the topic of Doctor Who mythology, the theories on time travel. Now, I still plan to do a video blog on that very topic. But for today, I'm taking a short detour, more or less of a blog, but more like a rant, but I'm still going to do it in the fashion and style of this, like a documentary style blog, like I usually do. And what it's related to, and the reason why I'm taking this detour, is due to the fact of that a lot of the news, a lot of the information that's coming from Disney. Lucasfilm now is under Disney because of the acquisition that was made a couple of years ago. And as we get closer to Episode 7, The Force Awakens, there's more and more news and more rumors that are coming out in the fan reaction. And I decided that there's a lot of things that are upsetting me, really upsetting me, getting me upset as a fan because I'm a passionate diehard fan. And there's a lot of things that are taking place in the world of Lucasfilm and Disney that are upsetting me, but more so with the fan reaction that's happening. And I originally wasn't going to be doing a topic on the prequel trilogy and the original trilogy, but some of the rumors and some of the fan reaction is getting heated up again, just when I thought it was dying down and these issues were going away. They're coming back. It's just like that thing from Joel. Just when you thought it was safe to go back into the water, well, same concept, but only with fan enthusiasm, the world of Star Wars. And that's what I'm going to talk about. Now, I'm not going to talk about Disney or some of the things with Disney because there's a lot of things that are rumors, and I don't know if they're true. So I'm not going to critique anything because I really don't know if any things are true. I'd rather get my facts straight by waiting to see what happens, rather than critique something before I really know all the facts. But what I am going to do is I'm going to talk about the subject of the Fanboys today, which is something I've been dealing with for the last 16 years, especially with my history with Star Wars and being a fan and being involved with this franchise and this saga. And so that's what I'm going to talk about. Now, I don't want to jump ahead too fast because I'm going to give some of the details. Like I said, I wasn't really going to talk about this. I'd rather talk, instead of critiquing things that I don't like, I'd rather talk about things that I do like. But this is so passionate to my heart. This is so close to my heart, and I feel so passionate about it. I feel that I needed to address it in a blog. So that's why I'm going to do this blog. Now, unfortunately, because I'm working on this blog this week, I'm going to have to push the blog on the Doctor Who mythology blog off to early next month, to the early of March. So look for it then. But I do apologize that I'm pushing that off. But you will get that blog, including the feature blogs for Star Wars mythology and Doctor Who mythology. But let's get to today's topic, which I do feel convicted I need to talk about. I'm titling this blog, or rant, whatever you want to call it, the rant blog or whatever. I'm titling it The Dark Side, this is the title of it, The Dark Side of the Fanboy. And you'll understand why I call it that in a minute. The Dark Side of the Fanboy. Well, let me get in and discuss what a fanboy is, or how I define a fanboy. In our fast-growing culture, in our millennial generation, terms and words that we've used constantly change their meaning according to the context of culture. So, people might disagree over my definition of the word fanboy, or it might even define it in a particular dictionary. But I'll tell you how I interpret the term fanboy, because realistically, when you think of fanboy, you think of the nerd, the geek who's into science fiction and fantasy and comics and superheroes and video games. And I guess that would include me. I mean, I probably, under a technical, simple textbook dictionary definition, I'm a fanboy. But I don't consider myself a fanboy in the context, when you take the context of what it has evolved to, especially under the franchise of Star Wars and Lucasfilm. And let me get into that, because I'm going to describe the difference between a fanboy and what I am, and tell you why I title this blog "The Dark Side of the Fanboy." Now keep in mind, when I talk about the negativity, because I'm not going to put fanboys in a very good light, so I wanted to make a distinction between the fan and a fanboy, because I don't consider myself a fanboy, although I'm a diehard fan of Star Wars. So let me describe the difference. If you enjoy Star Wars, if you really like Star Wars and you're really into it, and you follow it, you're a fan. You're somebody who is enthusiastic at following it, enjoys Star Wars, and you follow it. Now, if you are somebody like me, who absolutely loves everything with Star Wars, and has OCD and obsessive compulsive to know everything about it, read all the books and read all the novels and the comics and have a collection and watch the movies over and over again and learn the mythology and do these blogs like I'm doing and go to the conventions like I do, then you're considered a diehard fan, a hardcore fan. I call it a diehard fan. I call myself a diehard fan, and there's nothing wrong with that, because what it is you're saying not only do you like something so much that you follow it, but you're so passionate about it. You love it. You want to know everything about it. You want to know inside and out. You're obsessed with it. And there's nothing wrong with that. And I am obsessed with Star Wars, so obviously I consider myself a diehard fan. And I know that there are thousands of others out there who are diehard fans. So I consider myself, so anybody who considers themselves a fan in that category is like me, would be a diehard fan. And I consider that positive. Now, a fanboy, on the other hand, let's get to the term fanboy. There's somebody who you would consider classified just like me, who has that strong interest and strong following, and very passionate about a topic, very passionate about Star Wars. And they try to follow it, and they're obsessed about it just like I am, but only from a very negative, very vitriolic, negative, hateful aspect. That is the difference between the diehard fan like myself and a fanboy. So if you consider yourself a fanboy and you've loved everything about Star Wars just like I have, don't get offended. Please don't get offended, because I'm not calling you a fanboy just because you're obsessed and you love Star Wars. I'm that way too. I love Star Wars and I'm obsessed with it, and I'm passionate about it. But I call myself a diehard fan. I don't put myself in a category of a fanboy, because the context, how the word has evolved. Keep in mind, words evolve over time in particular cultures. And like I said, our millennial generation is the way it is. It's just crazy the way words have evolved. So my interpretation, how fanboys evolved, is they're passionate about Star Wars. They follow Star Wars, but it's from a very negative, hateful, vitriolic, venomous perspective, and I'm going to go get into that. So that's the difference between a fan or a diehard fan, particularly what I call myself, and a fanboy. Now, I do not consider myself a fanboy. Let me, in order to tell this story, let me tell you how I came to this term, fanboy, and why I call these fanboys from the negative perspective. How I think they're very dark and negative, and venomous. But I think the best way is to share my story of what I went through, my history with Star Wars. Tell you the history, because I've been into Star Wars. I've been a passionate fan for 28 years, for the last 28 years, since 1977. In the summer of 1977, like May or June, when the first Star Wars movie came out. Of course, it wasn't when it was the first original release, when it came out in May of 1977. It wasn't Episode 4: A New Hope. 20th Century Fox wouldn't let Lucas do that, because they felt it would confuse it. It was only the re-release of the first Star Wars movie when Lucas wanted to announce that he was doing the trilogy, so he put Episode 4: A New Hope. But originally, when that was first released, the first couple months of the summer, there was no Episode 4: A New Hope. It was just Star Wars. And I saw that. My father, I was 7 years old at the time. And my father and my grandfather, my father's father, the two of them, took me out together. The both of them took me out to the theater, and I saw it. And of course, a 7-year-old kid is just mesmerized. You know, it just pulls you in just like that. And keep in mind, I grew up even before, before that time, before 1977. My father introduced me to science fiction. I got into science fiction because of my father. I watched all the classic Star Trek. When I came home from school, watched the classic Star Trek series over and over again in syndication. And I've watched other movies, King Kong, the Godzilla movies, the classic Buck Rogers with Buster Crabbe, and also the classic Flash Gordon serials with Buster Crabbe. So I watched all those when I was just, even younger than 7 years old. So I enjoyed science fiction. But when I saw Star Wars in 1977, it just blew me away. And then a couple months later, it was in July. Now, keep in mind, being 7 years old, you were talking about hundreds of years before, millions of years before I ever drove a car, so I couldn't get to the theater on my own. I was just only a little kid at the time. But I relied on the adults, my parents or my relatives, to take me to the theater. So later that summer, in July, my aunt took me again. And it took me again to the theater. She didn't see Star Wars before that time, but she wanted to see Star Wars. This was in July. So I saw it a second time that same summer. She asked me what movie I wanted to see. I said I want to see Star Wars. She wanted to see it, so perfect. We went to see it, and I was hooked. That was it. That's when I started collecting the action figures when they first came out. It was Kenner at the time, not Hasbro, but I think Hasbro brought up Kenner or something like that over the last couple decades or so. But anyway, what happened was I bought the action figures and the games that came, and I was hooked ever since. Every single Christmas of my childhood was complete Star Wars stuff. When Christmas came in time and my parents said make a list, I made my entire list was Star Wars stuff. It wasn't mixed with other stuff. That was it. I was obsessed with Star Wars. Had to have Star Wars toys, and each summer, like in 1980, in the summer of 1980, my father was away. My father was away he was in the Army Reserves, and when he did his 2 weeks active duty, which was usually in May, each year he went out and saw one of the big summer movies and came home and told me about it. Well, in 1980, that was when Empire Strikes Back came out, so he saw it and told me a little bit about it. And I remember begging him, you gotta take me. And so we went out as a family one evening, and we all saw Empire Strikes Back. And of course, I was blown away again and continued to collect Star Wars. And then in 1983, I was turning 13 that summer. The summer of 1983, I was turning 13. That's when Return of the Jedi came out. And my father took my brother and sister, I, and a friend of mine. We all went out to see Return of the Jedi. Of course, that blew me away, and I was into Star Wars. But of course, then I found out that was Lucas' last. I didn't know all the insights of why Lucas wasn't going on. Obviously it was because of technology not being up to standard and issues in his personal life, which he had to stop making Star Wars at the time, so that's why he waited to make the prequels. But Star Wars had stopped, and but I was still into Star Wars. I was still watching the VHS when it eventually came out in VHS tape. I was watching that throughout the 80s, but I thought that was the end of Star Wars. And then in the 90s, that early 90s, that's when Timothy Zahn came out with this Thrawn trilogy, and of course I was enthralled with that. I got in that, and that started the Expanded Universe franchise, which lasted for the following 20 years. And I got into that, and I was reading, of course, I'm a slower reader than most, so I'm way behind, but I got into the Expanded Universe thing. And it was like, and I was in college at the time, reading the Expanded Universe and with my friends, and we were talking about, there's going to be a new Star Wars movie. And of course, in the earlier 90s, I said, that can't be, I thought it was done. But then, then 97, Lucas re-released the trilogy again, and then there was talk about the prequels, and that's when we really got into it. That's when we really got, psyched up into it. And then came 1999 with the release of the Episode 1, The Phantom Menace. And of course, trepidation. I was a little, had a little trepidation because I thought my experiences is usually sequels or, continuation movies that haven't been out. I said, well, what about this is not really that good? What about, Star Wars sucks now, And, but ironically, when I did go see The Phantom Menace, I was blown away. I saw it the first day it came out. I was blown away. And I saw it several times over, in the theater again. Went back, took my friend who doesn't drive. We went to see The Phantom Menace again. I was blown away. I was like excited. It exceeded my expectations. It actually exceeded my expectations. And I was enthralled with that. And of course, the same thing in 2002. I went to see Episode 2, Attack of the Clones. That blew me away. I love that. And then, of course, 2005, I graduated. That's the year I graduated seminary. That was the last of my higher education I was in. I was graduating with a master's degree, and I had a diploma in one hand, my movie ticket in the other hand, and went to I saw Episode 3, Revenge of the Sith, and of course, needless to say, that blew me away more than all the other two of the prequel trilogy. And I thought, wow, this is Lucas has really done it. I mean, you've got a 6-movie saga. This is the best legacy or the best science fiction franchise of all time. But it didn't end with that. The dark side came in, and all of a sudden, you're shocked to find out that not everybody agrees with you, and of course that's usual. Not everybody is going to agree with you. But what happened was the criticisms came in. I first heard people saying, "Oh, Phantom Menace, what kind of movie?" All this back saying Lucas had 16 years, because it was 16 years between 1983 when he did Return of the Jedi to 1999 when the Phantom Menace came out. And a lot of these people were saying, "Oh, the Phantom Menace was horrible. 16 years, what this kind of crap," and everything like that. And a lot of people complained about. First thing was Jar Jar. So I said, the first I thought it was Jar Jar that they were upset about. Then Jar Jar had a barely in the next 2 movies. He had barely had a role in Clones, Attack of the Clones, Episode 2, Attack of the Clones, and Episode 3. He didn't even have a speaking role in Episode 3. Revenge of the Sith. I couldn't figure it out then, but the complaints just kept going and going and going, which I'm going to cover and critique some of those complaints that the fanboys have. But, they started to say, "I hate the prequels," and they started to curse the prequels, and, they said, this ruined Star Wars, and this and that. And then all of a sudden, it didn't stop with that. Then they started to curse the original trilogy, not because of all the changes that Lucas has made, and I'm going to cover that in this blog, or some critique, some of those things that the fanboys had. And all of a sudden, of course, the internet was around and getting big and bigger. In 1999, from the year 2000, from this previous decade, the internet. So all you had is, video blogs and other kinds of blogs with message boards, and just thousands and thousands of fanboys just come out. They just come out of the woodwork, come out of nowhere. Come out of the darkness, and just scream and spit venom against the prequel trilogy and say, "This is a horrible, ruined Star Wars," And then it didn't end there. Lucas made all these changes in the special edition for the original trilogy, and he screwed that up. He screwed all Star Wars up. And then, then came the most vitriolic, hateful speech. And literally, I am not paraphrasing this. This is an exact quote which I have got from reading many fanboy blogs and fanboy posts on these message boards. I literally have seen this more than time, and it's disgusting to me. But this is a literal quote which I have seen over and over again on the internet. And it says, "Lucas raped my childhood." Out of all the appalling things, they're gonna compare their disappointment with Lucas, with the prequel trilogy and the changes he made in the original trilogy. They're gonna compare that with committing the crime of rape, a horrible crime of desecration and violence, towards a person where you're forcing them to have sex. It's a horrible, heinous crime. And they're going to compare that. They're going to take that and you say, well, that's essentially what Lucas is doing to me, because they're disappointed with what he did with the saga. And it's just disgusting. And over the years, I thought that after Revenge of the Sith was over, after the Revenge of the Sith came out, and a few years after that, when there was no more, we thought that was the end of the Star Wars movies, and they had the Clone Wars on TV, and I went to two celebration conventions down in Florida, in Orlando. I thought that this time of hating Lucas and hating the prequel trilogy and the special edition of the original trilogy, I thought that was just phasing out. Now with this acquisition and the announcement that they're going to do the sequel trilogy, it's all coming. It's like coming back, and it's like getting its second breath, its second wave. It's coming back again, and it's disturbing me. And that's the reason why I'm doing this blog. If I felt it was just phasing out, I probably wouldn't even do this, because, like I said, I don't like to do blogs on things that I don't like. I want to on negative. I want to do something on positive, what I do like. But the things that disturb me is what they were saying about George Lucas, is because now this hate, because now George Lucas doesn't own Lucasfilm anymore, and he technically does not have control over where the saga goes. I'm hoping that Disney will let Lucasfilm be faithful to George Lucas's vision, and if not, it's going to be travesty. But because of that, it is getting me nervous with some of the things, especially from the vitriolic hatred and the speeches that are coming from the fans that I'm seeing as of late. But essentially, the hatred, well, a lot of the hatred things that I'm getting is, it seems like they only like Star Wars up to 1983. And actually, I've seen a lot of blogs and I've seen a lot of quotes on these message boards by the fanboys saying that, he should have stopped. I mean, some of them have actually said he should have stopped with Star Wars after 1983. Yeah, right. For over a decade and a half, they've been begging Lucas to get back into Star Wars and make Star Wars. Now, with the saga, the 6-movie saga and the Clone Wars and everything that's going on, now they're saying, he should have just stopped. He's horrible. He's destroyed Star Wars, so he just should have left alone after 1983. Because really, that's what they do, is they hate everything about George Lucas and everything that George Lucas has done with Star Wars after 1983. Anything they say that they love, it stops with 1983 after Return of the Jedi came out, and anything he did with the saga, the changes he made to the original, the prequels, anything, the Clone Wars. A lot of them just hate that. They hate him, and they just have this vitriolic, venomous speech and this hate speech towards him. And it's just disgusting. I find it disgusting and disrespectful. And it's evolved. It's actually evolved. Like I said, over a decade ago, they were saying that he should have stopped making Star Wars from 1983. I think that's ridiculous, especially when millions of fans were begging him to get back into Star Wars. But it didn't stay with that. The hatred and the accusations continued to grow. And then, 5 years ago, I started to hear accusations saying, well, the only things that we really like about Star Wars, that's only because the others that were working for him, the others that were working for Lucasfilm and stuff like that, they were the ones who went against George Lucas, and they, because everything that George Lucas does with Star Wars, we know it's horrible, but we do know that we enjoy it. So what is it that we enjoy? Well, the things that we enjoy about it, about the original trilogy, or they said that it's because of others. Others wrote the dialogue, others wrote certain scenes, or others did certain, he will say because others directed the Empire Strikes Back and Return of the Jedi. They say, so what they're doing is they're saying that what made Star Wars good is only the others in Lucasfilm who worked with Lucas, who went against Lucas and made Star Wars good, because Lucas is horrible with anything with Star Wars. That's what they're saying. And I think that is so absurd. Now, don't get me wrong. All movie directors, all creators of science fiction genres and science fiction franchises, and all movie directors and stuff like that, when a film is good, or a series or a saga is good, or a franchise is good, We know it's not one man doing it all by himself. I want to give credit to everyone who worked with Lucas and Lucasfilm, who helped make Star Wars great, because there was others who helped, but it wasn't as these fanboys painted out, that Lucas is the Dark Master who's the destroyer, and these few people in Lucasfilm which salvaged whatever was Star Wars and made it good. That's garbage, and I think it's so disrespectful and so disgusting that these fanboys come out with such an accusation, because not only is it not true, but it is extremely disrespectful. You'll understand this is why I despise these fanboys so much. But anyway, that's what they are essentially saying. Anything that was good for the original trilogy, they were saying that others have done it. Lucas destroyed it. But it didn't stop there. Like I said, that victory, they went to emphasize, it went for more emphasizing that now, anything that Lucas touches with Star Wars, original trilogy, they'll find things that they don't like about the original trilogy, and they say, well, that's because Lucas did it. Everything because Lucas was heavily involved in the prequel trilogy. He wrote the entire prequel trilogy and directed all three. They're all because he did it. I mean, they literally come out with hate towards him. He destroys Star Wars. Anything he touches with Star Wars, he destroys. This is their accusation. And now, since the acquisition has come, this is what I've been seeing just of recent. Like I said, these last two accusations I've gotten over the last 5 years. And this hatred has been building for over 16 years. But just this last month, I'm seeing stuff posted online, message boards, blogs, whatever, certain posts. And now what they're doing is they're cursing Lucas. They're cursing Lucas. And they want Disney to change. They want Disney to decanonize the prequel trilogy and change, get the uncut versions of the original trilogy out on the Blu-ray, and they're cursing, and they're sitting there saying, "Thank heavens that Lucas doesn't have anything." I literally see a lot of cursing, and they use foul language. I can't even use a lot of the words, and that's why otherwise I would read you some of their quotes, but I can't, because this is a family-oriented website with videos. Minors might be looking at it, so I don't want to be dropping the F-bomb, but they use the F-bomb constantly, F Lucas, tell Lucas to F himself, I wish he would effing die. That's the kind of stuff that they would say. Thank heavens, effing Lucas is not involved with the Lucasfilm anymore. He destroys Star Wars. Maybe we could salvage Star Wars. This is the kind of hatred, vitriolic, venomous, disgusting, foul hatred that they have of Lucas. And now they want Disney to undo everything Lucas has done after the acquisition. That's what makes me upset. I did this blog early on, which I'm glad a lot of people are responding to. I'm very happy that people are responding to. But when Disney decanonized the expanded universe and put it under the Legends banner, I was trying to, because at the time I was very enthusiastic about the upcoming series of Rebels that Disney was doing, and then the sequel trilogy with Episode 7. So I was trying to find a middle-of-the-road, balanced position for the fans who are outraged that Disney decanonized the EU, and also for Lucas. I was trying to bridge that gap so we can find common ground. And I'm beginning to wonder if there is that common ground. And I'm, a little upset. Not with the fans who are upset about the EU. I'm appreciating them. I understand their position. I'm talking about my discouragement with Disney. Some of the rumors are here, but I'm not going to get into that or critique that, because, like I said, I don't know how much of it's true, how much will come out. I'd rather know something for a fact before I start announcing it and critiquing it, and because that would be essentially building a straw man if some of the stuff is not true. But anyway, to go on, I do know, I have read all these, like I said, for the last 16 years, this vitriolic hatred, venomous hatred towards Lucas. And I mean, and I'm just thinking to myself, I was just thinking to myself, of the of this venomous hatred that they have towards Lucas and what they say. They claim, these fanboys claim to be diehard Star Wars fans. They're passionate like I am. They're obsessed like I am with Star Wars. But yet they hate everything with Star Wars after 1983, and they hate George Lucas. I mean, even to the point that some of them, I've seen a couple posts on these message boards that wish death towards George Lucas. I mean, that's how horrible and foul and evil these people are. Disgusting. And depraved these people are, these fanboys are, wishing him death. I mean, it's utterly, not only utterly obnoxious, but it's evil in some ways, depraved, that the way they are. And I was thinking to myself, imagine if I said those things, start saying those things about Gene Roddenberry with Star Trek. Imagine if I went to Star Trek conventions and I said, something, Gene Roddenberry should have stopped making Star Trek after, he should have stopped making Star Trek after the original series ended in 1969. Because we know that the movies Wrath of Khan, episode, Star Trek II, Wrath of Khan, Search for Spock, Voyager, they're disgusting, and we know that Next Generation and DS9, they're all disgusting too. So everything that happened after the original series is disgusting with Star Trek. And then when I went for the say, something, what makes the original Star Trek, we know that anything Gene Roddenberry had to do with Star Trek is horrible, especially with the movies and the Next Generation TV show. But we still we admit that we like the original series, but we're going to sit there and say the only reason why the original series was good is because we know deep down that was other people that went against Gene Roddenberry. Gene Roddenberry is really not the master of Star Trek. He didn't really come up with anything. He threw a couple ideas out there that might have been interesting, but really it's other people that made Star Trek good. So really he had hardly anything to do with making Star Trek good. He's just horrible anytime he touches Star Trek. And then go on from there saying anytime he touches Star Trek, because his name is associated with Star Trek, he is horrible. He is disgusting, and say all these venomous foul things against Gene Roddenberry. And then, curse him and say that I'm glad he's dead, and Star Trek should end, and his name should be removed from Star Trek. Let him never have anything to do, his name to be doing with Star Trek. If I said all these foul things like these fanboys are saying about George Lucas, and went to these Star Trek conventions and said that, I think all the Star Trek fans would arrest me, convict me on the spot, a jury would convict me on the spot, put me on death row, and they would have me facing a firing squad by dawn. I'm convinced of that. But yet, it's okay for these fanboys to spit their venomous hate and make all these horrible accusations against him and against Star Wars, anything he had to do with Star Wars after 1983. And that brings me to my final point. About Fanboy, because I'm thinking to myself, like I said, fanboys would claim that they're fans, passionate fans of Star Wars. They're obsessed with Star Wars, just like I am as a diehard fan. How can that be so? I'm thinking to myself, how can that possibly be so? Because if they hate Star Wars so much, they hate George Lucas so much, they just ought to reject it. I mean, think about it. I hate. If you've seen my previous, I'm not going to go too much into it, but Torchwood, my blog on, you have to watch my blog on comparison between the classic Doctor Who series and the new Doctor Who series, because I cover Torchwood. I hate Torchwood. I passionately hate Torchwood, but I don't watch it. I'm not involved with it. I'm involved with Doctor Who, but I don't watch Torchwood, and I don't come out with venomous speech. I'm not crazy about Russell T Davies, and I hate the show Torchwood, but I don't go constantly spitting venom, talking about Russell T Davies needs to die. They need to take his name off the list that he's involved, and they need to take Torchwood away and decanonizes it, and say all these venomous speech. And this is coming from somebody, I don't like Torchwood. But who's somebody who doesn't like Torchwood, passionately hates Torchwood, I just ignore it. I did a blog about it saying this is what I don't like, but I go on. But the fanboys just are obsessed. They're just hounding and obsessed with this venomous hate towards Lucas and towards the entire saga now of Star Wars. So how can I reconcile the fact, because I consider myself a Doctor Who fan, but not a fan of Torchwood. But that's what I'm talking about. If you hate something so much, then I don't call myself a fan. So how can they call themselves a fan and hate it so much? And that pondered me. That really made me think for a long time. I could not wrap my mind around it until, you get these epiphanies. Well, epiphany did come to me. Well, what is it? What did I learn, or what came to me? What thoughts came to me that helped me reconcile, understand it? Well, the key title is, let me finish what I'm saying. I apologize. What came to me to help me understand how a fanboy could hate Star Wars so much and hate George Lucas so much and yet still claim to be a fan? Well, I came up with an answer. That answer is really in the title, The Dark Side of the Fanboy, what I've titled my this blog to be. I think that what they are a fan. I've come to the conclusion that the fanboys who essentially bash George Lucas and bash the prequels and bash the original trilogy, the special edition, the original trilogy, yes, they are a fan. And I've discovered how they are a fan. They're a fan from the perspective of the dark side. I think of them as a fan. They're a Sith Lord fan. If I consider myself as a diehard fan, somebody who loves Star Wars, I'm like the Jedi fan who loves Star Wars and respects George Lucas. Not to sit there and say that George Lucas is immutable and perfect. He's a man with clay feet. There's things I disagree with him, and I'm going to express some things I disagree with him. But I respect him. And I'm with him. That's why. I agree. If I didn't like Star Wars and I didn't agree with his vision, I wouldn't be involved with Star Wars. But because generally, majority of his vision, I agree with. That's why I consider myself a diehard fan. So I consider myself like the Jedi, the light side of being a fan. They are a fan, but from the perspective of the dark side. They're a fan but on the dark side. They are Sith Lord. The fanboys are the Sith Lord. We as the diehard fans are the Jedi. From the light side of the Force. They are a fan from the perspective of the Sith Lord, the dark side of the Force. So that's why I call it the dark side of the fanboy. Because they're a fan, but from the dark side. Because what they are a fan of, they're not a passionate fan of loving Star Wars for what it is. They're a passionate fan of hating Star Wars, hating everything that George Lucas did with Star Wars after 1983, and they're also very much hateful they're hateful of George Lucas. And this whole thing, I mean, I follow politics, and I'm not going to get into political things to make that a Robert Kraft's snare to go off on that, because this is not about politics. But I find it very hard today in the political scene because it's just so nasty, vitriolic and hateful, whatever side that you're on. It's vitriolic and hateful. And you cannot find a common ground or agree to disagree and respect one another. It's just accusations and spitting venom and hate and wishing others would die and all this ugliness and darkness and nastiness and foul, just that kind of same mentality, that equal mentality is what's going on right now with what I'm trying to think of the word you would call it inside of science fiction fans. With the fanboys, especially with the fanboys, that same kind of nastiness and hateful and vitriolic hate. It sort of reminds me of, that's why I consider them. The fanboys are fans, but they're fans of hating George Lucas and hating everything that George Lucas has did with Star Wars after 1983. And something it reminds me of, I bring up the fact that I view the fanboys as Sith Lords. Well, who I think about is Emperor Palpatine. Emperor Palpatine in Episode 6, Return of the Jedi. When he's telling Luke, he says, use your aggressive feelings, boy. And that ultimate, statement that just chills down your back. When Palpatine says, let the hate flow through you. That's what I feel like I'm saying. It's almost like this invisible force. It's Emperor Palpatine with the fanboys. And when the fanboys think of George Lucas and everything he's did with Star Wars, the special edition of Star Wars and the prequel trilogy, and the special edition of the original trilogy and the prequel trilogy, it's almost like I hear Emperor Palpatine's voice telling these fanboys, let the hate flow through you. That's what I hear. And so it's like, I feel this hate flowing through you. It's swelling in you now. That's what I feel like. It's like Emperor Palpatine's just egging them on. Like, hate George Lucas, hate Star Wars. So they become a fan of hating this series. So essentially, the negative effects on me is because I'm getting overwhelmed. I mean, it's discouraging because, Star Wars has inspired me over the years. It's made me into the person I'm in today. That's why I went to seminary, because of the spiritual aspects of the Jedi and the Force and stuff like that. I could relate to that, and that's why I wanted to study religion. And Star Wars has always been something that has excited me and has inspired me. But these fanboys, the hate that they come out with, like Emperor Palpatine's, let the hate flow through you, and they certainly do. They certainly let the hate flow through them, and it swells up in them. And when I get online and I try to look for fans that have common ground and common interest and like-minded and kindred spirits of mine, all I see is this vitriolic hatred towards George Lucas, this hateful, venomous, vitriolic hate that they have, this nastiness that they have, and also the hate that they spit out towards the special edition of the original trilogy and also the prequel trilogy. It discourages me. It's almost like it robs me at that time of my enjoyment of Star Wars, my excitement, the inspiration it gives me. And then you think to yourself, could I be wrong? Because, you see thousands and thousands of posts, and all these, they're just coming out of the woodwork, in droves and stuff like that, and it just discourages you. You start to wonder, am I wrong or something like that? Something wrong with me because I love Star Wars so much? Of course, my family and others tell me, you got to ignore those. You love Star Wars, that's the fact. That's what you got to go with. And I know that that's what I have to go with. But these fanboys really get me down, and sometimes I get depressed. And I really don't like dealing with this issue, but I feel like I should deal with this issue. But let me go on, because I think I'm going too much into the definition of the fanboy. I want to go in and talk a little bit about the prequel trilogy, some of the complaints, specific complaints, that these fanboys have espoused with the prequel trilogy, and also special edition of the original trilogy, the changes. And explain what their complaints are and why I think they're ridiculous. I'm going to start out with the... I'm going to go through Episode 1, The Phantom Menace, and Episode 2, Attack of the Clones. I am not going to cover Episode 3, Revenge of the Sith, and I'll tell you why. Because almost universally, I emphasize the word almost universally, critics and fans alike have loved that movie. Now, that hasn't stopped. That's why I said the word almost. The fanboys even put Revenge of the Sith in with hating the prequel trilogy. But their critique would be just a rehash of all the stuff that I'm going to cover with The Phantom Menace and Attack of the Clones. So there's no reason to rehash those same arguments again, because they use the same stuff for Revenge of the Sith. It's just rehash for that movie. But I'm going to pretty much cover what their arguments are, where they hate, why they dislike Episode 1, The Phantom Menace, and Episode 2, Attack of the Clones. Let's start off with the fanboy critiques. Jar Jar Binks, obviously the first one. Jar Jar. Okay, well, let me start off with this. Like I said, when I first started hearing complaints from 1999 on, before Episode 2 came out, I thought the problem was with Jar Jar Binks. And I thought, and I've been hearing that Jar Jar is not going to have a big role in the next two films. And so I thought that would solve the problem. But it didn't. But anyway, let me explain. The thing is, but even before that time, I thought that it was a little... No, don't get me wrong. I was a little annoyed with Jar Jar Binks. He was kind of annoying a character when I first saw him back in 1999. But he didn't stop me from loving the movie. He didn't stop me from loving the movie or being inspired by it. And I'll tell you why. Because the way the fanboys talk about it, you would think that Jar Jar, as annoying as he is, he's one of the main protagonists, or the antagonist, the villains. He was in the role of Obi-Wan or Qui-Gon or Darth Maul. He's one of the great good guys or the great bad guys, the ones that you would normally love, the central figures of that movie. He wasn't. He was a sidekick. He was a sidekick character. Yes, annoying, But, I also have heard annoying things people have said about the Ewoks. And even about, from the original trilogy, even C-3PO. There was people who thought that C-3PO was annoying, and they used to talk, oh, horrible. They would talk about C-3PO back then, same way they do Jar Jar Binks. But he was a side character, so, come on. And he hardly had any roles in the future 2 movies. If Episode 2, Attack of the Clones, and Episode 3, Revenge of the Sith. But anyway, one of their biggest arguments, and this is for all 3 films, is the CGI effects. And I cannot tell you the hate and all. I mean, the comments about the CGI are so ridiculous. I just read a post the other day that said the CGI effects that are in the Star Wars movies are so fake. They're not good compared to today's standards of CGI. But the puppets, before the changes that Lucas made, the updated with the original trilogy, the old puppets from back in the day, they were more realistic. They are good by today's standards. Now, I don't know what he was drinking, what water he was drinking from, but he sure definitely drunk the Kool-Aid on that one, because that is ridiculous. Look at the puppet effects from back in those days. They are not that great. They're great for then because that's the best that they can do. You want to look? Look at the classic Doctor Who series. This is why everybody laughed at me for Doctor Who, because the puppet effects of the monsters and everything are horrible. Of course, I looked at Doctor Who, or even Star Wars from back, that even with bad effects with puppets, I like it for the story. But the CGI does improve it. The problem is people are not used to it. And also, too, CGI has to evolve. So obviously, what you would get 16 years ago is good, but not as great as what we have today, because they learn. But it does improve the storytelling of Star Wars. Also, too, I'm going to go on now and talk about me as a diehard. What's my defense of Phantom Menace? What is great about the Phantom Menace? Well, other than the fact that Star Wars has returned, we finally get to see the heart and civilization of the galaxy. Okay, remember that statement in Episode 4, when New Hope, when C-3PO and R2-D2 finally meet Luke Skywalker, and they don't know what planet they're on. They're totally confused. What planet are we on? And Luke says, he gives his, instead of saying just Tatooine, gives his famous sarcastic statement, expressing, because this is the emotional feel that he wants to get away from the farm of his uncle and aunt and be a pilot. So his sarcasm is coming out of frustration. So Luke says, if there's a bright center of the universe, we're on the planet that's farthest from. And that is so true. All the planets, as spectacular as the original trilogy was, all the planets were basically backwater planets. Uninhabited, or primitive societies. They're uninhabited, like Hoth, or the primitive societies like Endor with the Ewoks. And we know that from a technical standpoint from back in the day, that's all Lucas could do, because like I said, Lucas felt that he was limited to what he could write compared to what he could put on screen because of technology. That's why he wanted to wait till computer technology caught up so he can do the prequel trilogy. And you can understand that. There's a reason for that. And we understand it when we see the Phantom Menace. And if fanboys could just take their blinders off and understand for that purpose, they would see the logic. Because we finally get to see. And also, too, from a story perspective, it's not incoherent because we know, if you've seen my video on the Galaxy, Star Wars Mythology 1, the Galaxy, in the Outer Rim is where most of those events take place. And in the Outer Rim, there's thousands of not uncharted, but they're all charted, but backwater planets, because you're not in the heart of the galaxy. You're closer to frontier. And that's where the Rebel Alliance had to stay. The reason being is because they were trying to hide in corners. Like think about it. If I was trying to, if the United States government went rogue, became a dictatorship, and we had to fight a rebellion to restore democracy, we wouldn't be hanging around in New York City or Washington, D.C., or even Atlantic City. Would be in, we'd be out down south in the Appalachian Mountains, in the remote areas of the Appalachian Mountains where there's hardly any civilization, or there's just small town folk. That's where we would be, trying to hide from those hunting us down. Well, that's where the rebels were trying to hide. They were trying to hide from the Empire, so they wouldn't be in the heart of the galaxy. But in the Phantom Menace, we do get to see, and also in the other movies of the clones and Sith, we get to see the heart of the galaxy. We get to see the planets that we hear, Alderaan, and especially Coruscant, which is the capital planet of the galaxy. We get to see all these things. So that's important. We finally get to see what Luke Skywalker was talking about. Another thing is Jedi Knights of the Old Republic. We hear in the original trilogy, they were the great guardians of They were the guardians of galaxy in the Old Republic. They were fighters for justice and peace. We hear all these things, but we don't see anything. Obi-Wan, by then he's old, so we don't expect him to be like he was in his prime, but we see the Jedi Knights, we see Qui-Gon, we see Obi-Wan and the Jedi Order, how the Jedi Order was fixed, and we see Obi-Wan and Qui-Gon fight, doing flips and using the Force and fantastic battle scenes and stuff like that. We see what the Jedi Knights were, which we didn't get to see in the original trilogy, and understandably why. But we finally get to see who they are and what they were like. All the stories we heard and the rumors we heard, they're guardians of the galaxy, they're fighters for justice and peace in the galaxy. We finally get to see who they were during the time of the Old Republic. And finally, I want to say one of the things is we have great protagonists, people like, obviously other than Obi-Wan, Qui-Gon Jinn. And I am a huge fan of Qui-Gon Jinn. Huge fan. I think his character is awesome. That's all I can say for that. And for the antagonist, the Sith Lord, Darth Maul, who's going to argue with that? Everybody loves Darth Maul. Matter of fact, everybody complains that he was killed off too quickly, or wiped out. But there's reasons, because the mythology of Star Wars, Lucas had to go on and talk about how Palpatine converted others and how it led up to the conversion of Anakin Skywalker to the dark side. So that's why he had to go. But everybody loves Darth Maul as the villain. Who's going to argue with that? Going on to Episode 2, Attack of the Clones. Fanboy critique. Again, CGI effects. They complain about the CGI effects. Oh, it looks too fake. They used all fake and this and that. I wanted them to do puppets and costumes and stuff like that. Something most people don't realize? The clone troopers. And Lucas purposely, in Lucasfilm, he had Lucasfilm purposely not announce this for a couple of years until after Attack of the Clones came out, to see how the reaction. There was no clone trooper costume like there was stormtrooper costumes with the original trilogy. People in stormtrooper costumes. There was no clone trooper costumes. They were all CGI. Clone troopers were all CGI. Most people didn't even know about that. And for all their griping and all their whining and saying, oh, it's horrible, this looks fake. Well, if it really was, then they would have picked up on that immediately. Nobody picked up on that. And it just goes to show you the proof is in the pudding. They didn't notice that. Nobody noticed that. So a lot of this is, I think what it is just cultural hype. People start hearing things in a group, in a society, and we start to think it's like a mantra. We pick it up and it's got to be true because everybody else is saying it's true. It's got to be true. No, it's not true. It's like, can a million Chinese be wrong? Yes, they can. Let's go on to the next. This is the biggest one. Wooden acting and bad dialogue. Okay, that's what they say Attack of the Clones had. Wooden actually, they say the entire prequel trilogy had wooden acting and bad dialogue. Terrible acting, right? And the lines, they quote lines from the prequel trilogy. I even saw one time from Revenge of the Sith, ironically, when Obi-Wan talking with Padme, saying how's Anakin doing? I'm paraphrasing, but they were trying to make that quote and saying how terrible it is. And I think, man, these people these fanboys scrape the bottom of the barrel just to make the prequel trilogy look bad. And yet the old trilogy has the same kind of dialogue. What about when C-3PO goes having delusions of grandeur and no, that's what Han said. But they saying when C-3PO said everybody's I'm falling to pieces. It's describing that everybody's arguing this and that. He says I'm falling to pieces, and apologize for not making the whole quote. But my point is that the old trilogy, if you look at compare the types of quotes, or like when Han said, "Where did you dig up that old fossil?" and stuff like that. Think about it. If those kind of quotes were in the prequel trilogy, they would be examples of why it's bad acting. But nobody pays attention to that because it's the original trilogy. And it's hypocrisy, and it's not really good thinking. It's not good thinking. Plus, I want to emphasize, George Lucas never said that he was great on dialogue. He was the master of dialogue. He said that he was a visual storyteller. He was telling the story, of a galaxy, science fiction, of a galaxy at war, a battle between good and evil, where they were trying to restore democracy to a government that went tyrannical. And I like to say this. Star Wars, when they talk about acting, poor acting, wooden acting, and bad dialogue and all that, Star Wars is not a William Shakespeare play. It's not. Shakespeare is great. Don't get me wrong. Theatrical play has great, but if you're really into dialogue and you want to see be inspired by a screenplay and dialogue and great, something like that, then go to Broadway, see a William Shakespeare play, but don't go to Star Wars. That's ridiculous. They're expecting Star Wars to be a William Shakespeare play. Another complaint is that Anakin is whiny. The great evil of the universe, the big villain of the universe. There's no way he could be whiny. That just cheapens who he is. I see Anakin as whiny. He just cheapens and makes it look like he's just stupid rather than the big villain. You don't understand. If you're saying that and you don't understand the story of Darth Vader. Darth Vader, if you know anything about Star Wars, I'm even talking about apart from the prequel trilogy. It's the tragedy of Anakin Skywalker. When we first see Darth Vader, we're frightened by him. We think he's the major villain when we see him in Episode 4. But by the time we get to Episode 6, we learn that the real one who's pulling the strings, the real evil one, is Palpatine, the Emperor. And Anakin has fallen into the dark side, and he's become evil. But he's more of a tragic character, rather than the central evil of the galaxy. And that's why he's redeemed at the end. Well, if you understand that theme, then it would make sense to understand Anakin's whininess over the struggle because of the life that he had, come from being a slave, being separated, being a young child when he was like 9 or 10, being separated from his mom, whom he loved, and having that anxiety, and having all these desires to do as a Jedi and could never fulfill it, and he's whiny and confused and frustrated and always making bad choices, and you can understand that that's his character and why he turned to the dark side, why he became Darth Vader. So their complaints for that don't make any sense. One of the big complaints, is the love story between Anakin and Padme. Oh, it's phony. Every time they're together, it's phony. They don't, it's supposed to be having a little passionate love affair, but yet it just seems forced, phony, and all that. I got news for you. Star Wars, it's not a love story. Okay? You're not watching the Thornbirds when you're watching Star Wars. So you're not going to expect, when you see when you see the love story between Padme and Anakin, you're not watching the Thornbirds. Okay? If that's your thing, you love, nothing against you, nothing against love stories, not critiquing them, not putting them down. They have their place. I'm not personally not into them, but people are into them, and that's fine. But if that's what you're into, that's what you want to see. You want to see a passionate love affair, go read a Daniel Steele novel. Okay? If Daniel Steele was writing about Anakin and Padme, that's what you would get. You would get that passionate love affair. But Star Wars is not a Daniel Steele novel. This theme is what Lucas was trying to get across with the Anakin and Padme love story. Is you got this young guy, anxiety, who's having all these emotional problems, these separation anxiety from his mother, falling in love with a girl that he knows morally he can't be with, legally and morally he can't be with, and yet trying to push it. Has all these confusing things, trying to play both worlds, trying to keep his love interest a secret, but also knowing it's wrong. And it's supposed to say it's awkward. It's awkward, you know. You're not having a passionate love affair. He's a young guy. Think about when you were a teenager and you were with a girl. I don't think you were reenacting a love story or the Thornbirds. I think it was probably like Anakin and Padme. You were awkward. You had a crush on a girl or whatever, and you thought maybe she wasn't interested in you, and you went out to hold her hand, and she pulled away, and you know, you were maybe reacted, you know, you got in a bad mood, screamed at her and screamed at your parents, got in a fight with your, you know, that kind of stuff happens. That's what he was trying to say, that Anakin had a love, he had an attachment to Padme, he was in love with Padme, it was awkward, and basically it was his downfall, you know, because of the decisions. He couldn't make the right decision as a Jedi. So it was supposed to be awkward. It was what it is, and it was supposed to be what it is. It wasn't some passionate love affair. Let me give the diehard defense, my defense. We finally get to see what the Clone Wars are, and how they were started. Remember in Episode 4, there was a couple mentions, you know, that when Luke said, "You fought it," he asked Obi-Wan, "You fought in the Clone Wars?" And then we see the hologram of Leia, where she's trying to call Obi-Wan, saying, "You fought with my father," you know, meaning Bail Organa. "You fought with my father in the Clone Wars." So we get a couple references of history of Star Wars universe that we know years or decades before this movie, there was an event called the Clone Wars, and everybody was, "What's all that? You know, what was that about?" That was, you know, I remember that captivated my attention for ever since I saw, you know, ever since the 80s. I was into Star. I always said, "What's the Clone Wars?" And when I was in college, and after the Timothy Zahn novels came out and the EU came out, there was all this talk about clones. We, you know, speculate what the Clone Wars were. Well, when we get into the Episode 2, Attack of the Clones, we finally see what the Clone Wars were, and we see how they started. That answered the question. That was great. That was awesome. Even in spite of the fact that people claim, "Oh, I don't like it." Well, I liked it. It explained a lot of things, made a lot of sense. You know, how the galaxy was divided. It was a war, and there was corruption in government, and there was and other star systems tried to separate, almost like the story of our own Civil War, where the southern states tried to secede from the Union. And then there was a war that was fought. Same thing happened. Brilliant storyline. And finally, we get a lot of questions answered. I also say, another one of my defenses, we see another great protagonist. I think Mace Windu really came out in that one. And I'm just like I am with Qui-Gon Jinn. I'm a huge fan of Mace Windu. Samuel L. Jackson did a great job at Mace Windu. He's awesome. Just love that character. And also the antagonist, Count Dooku. You know, who else better to get than Christopher Lee? You know, he played in the Hammer Dracula movies, and he was the Saruman in Lord of the Rings and stuff like that. And as a matter of fact, Count Dooku is a very similar character to Saruman, very similar role. So who better to get than Christopher Lee? I mean, awesome antagonist. And the biggest one that I'm going to defend, the third part, which is in my defense, which I'm going to go, is the lightsaber fight between Yoda and Count Dooku at the end of Clones. When I saw that, I didn't expect that. I did not know that. That's one of those little things I did not know going in watching Episode 2, Attack of the Clones. And when I saw Yoda at the end walk in and was going to have a fight, it just like shivers were coming down my spine. I was like emphatic with enthusiasm. It was just exciting. I you know, there's very few times I get that excited, but when that came through, it blew me away. I felt like it felt like magic. I actually felt, it's not being an adult. You don't get excited by Christmas anymore. It doesn't feel magical and all that kind of stuff. Everything gets mundane and routine. So it's very rare when you get those feelings like, man, you're actually in the world of magic. Well, that was one of those moments, seeing that. And the thing is we hear from the original trilogy that Yoda was a great master. He's one of the greatest Jedi masters. Well, something this goes back to the CGI. They would have Lucas, as much as Lucas would have done that, there was no way he could have got what you saw in Attack of the fight scenes with Yoda in Attack of the Clones and also Revenge of the Sith. There's no way he could even get it. Would look so fake with the puppet. Now, the puppet was great for what the purpose of the original trilogy was, and that was that he was a master in seclusion, almost like a monk, training Luke. That was fine, and it worked perfectly. It probably exceeded the expectations of what they wanted to go, because I remember seeing an interview with Lucas saying if this looked like a Muppet, like Kermit the Frog, it would have worked, but it didn't. So he was genius, but there's no way he could have moved from that with the puppet to have him fighting like you see in Episode 2 and Episode 3. But that was just awesome, and that's the same thing he fought in Episode 3. That way with Darth Sidious had an awesome fight. There's no way we would have been able to have seen that with the original show with the the puppets rather than CGI. But that's really ending my critique of the fanboys with the prequel trilogy and my defense of the prequel trilogy, because I love the prequel trilogy and I just don't understand it. I can't wrap my head around it. While there's so many people who hate it. But let me go on to the special edition, the last part, the special edition versions of the original trilogy. Let me start out by saying, Lucas has the right. I remember, which I refuse to watch. Now, I know some people will say, well, if you're refusing to watch this, aren't you wrongly critiquing it? No, because I read so much about it. I didn't feel like watching this documentary. It's called The People versus George Lucas. I think that, with George Lucas and the people, or something like that. I'm misquoting that, but it's a documentary on comparing the fans of Star Wars and George Lucas, claiming that all the fans are screaming, this is what they want. They want the uncuts, and he doesn't give them to them. And which I don't know, which I'm going to go into in a second. But anyway, let me say this with that. Their position in that documentary was that Star Wars is pretty much owned by the fans as much as it's owned by Lucas. So Lucas has a moral right to give them what they want. Wrong. Lucas made these movies for himself, and he's generous to invite us to come and watch those movies, enjoy his journey through that saga. He has every right as a creator of Star Wars to put what he wants in that artistic expression. And no matter how much whining, it doesn't make it right. I don't understand. I think it's like a cultural phenomena. It doesn't make sense. There's no logic behind it. But again, like I said, the fanboys are out to hate. They're a fan of hating what George Lucas has done with Star Wars, not loving it. Now the thing is like I said, remember I told you about that statement saying, oh, the puppets were great, even by today's standards. That's what they think. They want to, well, essentially what they want is they want to go back to get the versions of the original trilogy as they were in 1983. And personally, I don't like that. I don't like that. If they put that on Blu-ray, I mean, that's why I'm upset. There's all these rumors that Disney's going to do that, eventually put those out and start selling them. If they do that, if they just slap together, they just take the 1983, the trilogy from 1983, no updates, no additions, no fixtures on the special effects, and just slap together what was the Star Wars trilogy in 1983, slap that on a Blu-ray disc and start selling that. And you got all these fanboys going crazy over that. I am not going to get in line to buy that. I don't want that version. I'm sorry. I know maybe I'm in the minority, but I don't want that version. I can't emphasize enough. I don't know how many people have seen the original versions from going back to the 80s, 1983. But there are some bad spaceship effects and bad puppet effects. Yoda was one of the unique ones that I will admit that's even good by today's standards. But there are others, if you see in Episode 4, New Hope, and Episode 6, Return of the Jedi. There's some some of those aliens have some bad puppet effects. You can tell that they're fake, and I can tell them by now. I mean, as a kid, it was, state of the art and took you as magic. But today, Lucas did some right by fixing up some of those effects. I know people hate it, but he did right because they look more real. In spite of the fact that people don't want to admit that they look more real. To me, if I looked at the original puppets from back then, from New Hope and Empire and Jedi, it was a lot of them. They could look, some of those puppets for the aliens, they would look fake. Same thing with the spaceship effects. Some of them were great, especially in Empire Strikes Back and Return of the Jedi. But in New Hope, there was a lot of the spaceship with the Millennium Falcon, and also with the X-wing fighters and TIE wing fighters, and the battle in Yavin over the Death Star. It looked like it was like with the Buck Rogers and Flash Gordon, ships that looked like they were on a string and they were just flying straight, not like they would fly in space, but just like you would have on a string, like you saw in the old classic Buck Rogers and Flash Gordon from the 30s with Buster Crabbe. That's what they look like, and he invented that. Now you can, like, when you see the let me get to that in a second. I don't want to jump ahead, but you do see some of those bad effects. Plus a lot of the lighting, and this was really in the Battle of Hoth and Empire Strikes Back. Some of those ships were transparent because the way they had to do those effects back in those days, they had to mesh it in, the ship effects, with the land, the landscape of the snow. They had to compromise on some of the transparency with the ship, so you can actually see through, almost like seeing through metal, because they had to, in order to make the effect. Well, in his redos, in his special edition, he cleaned those up, so you doesn't look fake. And the spaceship scenes in the Battle of Hoth and Empire Strikes Back don't look fake anymore. These transparent or anything like that anymore. But let me go through. Now, keep in mind, I am not saying because I prefer and love the special editions of the original trilogy. That's not to say that I agree 100% with everything Lucas has done. There are some things I can live with and some things I can't. And I'm going to express which one. I'm going to go through all three, Episode 4, New Hope, Episode 5, The Empire Strikes Back, and Episode 6, Return of the Jedi. Let's start out with Episode 4, New Hope. What can go? What can I leave behind? What am I willing to leave behind? Well, the Han and Greedo scene, and that's one of the most famous complaints. Han shot first. I go to Star Wars conventions, got people wearing Han shot first. You got people sitting there saying, I don't want to hear anything, a Han shot first. Because in the new editions, we have the scene where Greedo has shooting first, and then Han responds by shooting back. Whereas in the original uncut version, Han shoots Greedo before he has a chance to shoot. I can go either way. It's a scene, people argue, well, Han was a smuggler and this and that, and he had to defend himself just like you would see in the style of the old westerns, a gunfight Yeah, I agree with that. Okay. But it doesn't take away from the scene if you have Greedo trying to shoot him first. I personally, if I had a choice, I'd probably go with Han shot first. But having Greedo shot first, it doesn't bother me. I don't understand, and it quite frankly gets me frustrated when I constantly hear, I want to see Han shot first, or whatever, Greedo, and stuff like that. To me, the scene doesn't bother me. It doesn't take away. If I had a choice, okay, let's go with Han. I can give that up. We can go with Han shot first. We can take the scene out where Greedo shoots, and we just have the original scene where Han shoots first. Okay, fine. I can go with that, changing that back to the original scene. But I personally don't have a problem with it. I might not agree with Lucas on that particular, but I don't have a problem with it. I really don't, and I don't understand the obsession that these fanboys have. But anyway, let me move on. Now, this is what I think must stay. Even though, in spite of what the fanboys are saying, it needs to be removed or whatever, I absolutely do not and reject anything else these things being taken out. for the sake of going back to the uncuts. This is what must stay. Okay, the extra material of the land speeder going through Mos Eisley. It builds it up. I mean, we're in a fictional universe. It shouldn't look so closed. It builds it up and makes Mos Eisley look big, with the aliens and with all the alien beings going through the town and spaceships and the other creatures, domesticated animals that these creatures that people have. It looks more alien. It looks bigger, makes the universe look bigger, makes that spaceport look bigger and more, it's better. It just makes it to go back to the old way. I mean, I was used to the old way because it's all I saw with the uncut versions before the new versions came out, with the updated versions came out. That's all I saw. But now it's like one of these things. It's like when you first go to DVD. When I first go to DVD, you go, I don't know what the difference is between this and VHS. It wasn't until you go back and start watching VHS, after you watch DVDs, then you go back and watch VHS tapes. Then you notice the difference. And I think that's the thing. It's like we get so used to watching the Lucas's updated, his special edition versions of the original trilogy, and then we start crying out for the old versions. And if you watch the old versions, I don't think I could go back to that. That would be too much of a loss for me. The Han and Jabba scene, they complain, oh, it looks horrible, and everybody has these complaints. They should cut I don't know why, because that scene fits in there perfectly. The whole theme throughout the original trilogy with Han and Jabba, Han was supposed to pay him. He shot Greedo because Greedo was supposed to bring him to him. Then Jabba said, Jabba was trying to shake him down, essentially. Didn't agree that he had, didn't accept the fact that he had to jump, jettison his cargo before an Imperial, caught by the Imperials, because he would have been imprisoned. He was caught with that, his stuff that he was trying to smuggle. Well, he said, look, I've got a job coming, meaning that he was going to be transporting Han and Obi-Wan to Alderaan, and they were going to give him a huge bounty for that. I mean, a huge reward, huge money for that job. And he's saying, look, I got this huge thing coming up. I'm going to pay you, whatever. And Jabba says, okay, I'll let you go. You just better pay me, or else, every bounty hunter out there, you won't be able to hide. There will be no star system you'll be able to hide in. And we see that in Empire Strikes Back, where he, because he gets involved with the rebellion, and he never gets a chance to pay Jabba. That's where Jabba sends the bounty hunters out after him. So I think that scene needs to stay. I mean, I understand that when they originally put it together, Lucas put that together, it wasn't the best CGI effects, but they've improved it, and I think it needs to stay. And of course, last but not least, the attack scenes on the Death Star. How could you not need them to stay? How could you? I mean, because it's like I said, it doesn't look fake with the X-wings looking like they're just on strings. You actually get to see the X-wings from different angles and close up, and you see the pilots, and you see the X-wings be able to move just like you would see in a dogfight, which was meant to be. Which Lucas literally said he couldn't feel like they were unfinished, and he actually finished them. And that's the way I feel. I actually feel that they're the updated special editions are the finished versions of the original trilogy, and I think they're the best. So they need to stay. Those scenes need to stay. Let's go on to Episode 5, The Empire Strikes Back. The only thing is I could sit there and say, I hate to say it, there's nothing in those changes that Lucas made that I can agree that needs to go. They all need to stay. The Wampa scene. I know that I've read comments online where fanboys have said, well, it looks better, when you don't see the creature, because it looks more scary when you don't see the creature. They were supposed to have, keep in mind, they were supposed to have a scene with the Wampas attacking the Echo base. They couldn't because it looked too fake. It was one of those things that Lucas couldn't pull off. He felt he couldn't pull off. It looked too fake, so they had to jettison it. Well, the Wampa scene that they did in the updated versions looks great. And people's arguments saying, well, let's go back to the old way because not seeing the creature really is more scary. You're not watching a horror flick. You're not watching a supernatural, what's that movie from the 60s, The Haunting, where you hear the ghost pounding and you get scared, but you never see, the enemy, you never see the bad guy or the ghost or whatever. That works great for suspenseful movies and horror movies. This is a science fiction movie, not a horror movie. You're not trying to get scared. When you want to see the creature, what is this creature that attacked Luke? So that scene needs to stay for the updated version. And also, absolutely, 100%, this is one of the things I feel strongest about. The Ian McDiarmid scene, replacing the scene. Remember when Vader talks to the Emperor in Empire Strikes Back? He replaced it with Ian McDiarmid as the Emperor, and changed a little bit some of the dialogues to connect it with A New Hope. That needs to stay more than one reason. Not only because it... But Ian McDiarmid, when they complain, well, we want the old versions back with the old way it was with the Emperor or whatever. That whoever they got to do the Emperor for that scene was not the Emperor, because the Emperor who they got for Return of the Jedi was Ian McDiarmid. So if you're gonna go, well, I don't want to have any connections with the prequel trilogy. Well, what about the original trilogy? What about what about Return of the Jedi? Ian McDiarmid was the Emperor, established as the Emperor for Return of the Jedi. Why not connect that scene? Even if you're going to discount the prequel trilogy, which I think is ridiculous. Ian McDiarmid played such a great role. They should have given him an award, Academy Award. Sends chills down your back to know, he plays the master evil of the universe. And he did that for all 3 films of the prequel trilogy. They had him, Lucas replaced him to do the scene with the Emperor with Vader in Empire Strikes Back. And he was the Emperor, obviously, in Return of the Jedi. So, adding him in, replacing him as the Emperor in Empire Strikes Back, not only makes sense, but is an absolute. These fans want to go back. It's so asinine if these fans want to go back to the old one, because I can't accept that. I can't look at the original cut with that other person doing the Emperor and take it serious. I'm sorry. That's ridiculous. I can't accept that. Also, what needs to stay is the extra material and the scenes in Bespin. The same reason is for the scenes I talked about for the land speeder going through Mos Eisley, because it opens up Bespin, makes it more complex of a city. You see the you see the people, you see the complexities of the city. It makes it look more real and more alien and more otherworldly. It really expresses what that universe is rather than being closed. That needs to stay. And if you bring back the uncuts, you're going to get rid of all that material, and I wouldn't be able to take that. It wouldn't be able to rest well with me, shall I say. Now, there's one other thing I added by hand to add to my notes that I didn't originally put in when I was researching this, for putting these notes together, and that's the Boba Fett voice, because that's another one, that's one of those other cruxes that the fanboys cry and complain about, because I apologize, because I put, I sort of improv put the Boba Fett topic in. But I'm trying to remember the guy who played Jango Fett in Clones, because he was. You remember, Boba Fett is a clone of Jango Fett, whom he raised as his son. So he's essentially he's the same. Boba Fett is Jango Fett. He's a clone. So it only makes sense to take the guy who played Jango Fett, use his voice, and replace his voice for the dialogue in Empire Strikes Back for Boba Fett. And all these fanboys want to go back to the other guy, the original guy who did it. Well, the thing is back when Lucas did the original trilogy, it had to evolve. The story had to evolve. And now, since the story evolved into Boba Fett being a clone of Jango Fett, then it makes perfect sense. So I would have a hard time giving that up, because it wouldn't fit. Now, I know some of these fanboys claim online they want to cut out the prequel trilogy, which I think is ridiculous. I don't think they're with Lucas on his vision, but that should stay, because Boba Fett is a clone of Jango Fett, so it only makes sense that he would have the same voice as Jango Fett. Anyway, let's go on to Episode 6, Return of the Jedi. What can go? The one thing that I think should go, which I can agree with, this is the one thing I can agree with the fanboys, is when Vader screams, "No!" If you remember you've seen the special edition versions, Return of the Jedi, at the end when Vader rescues Luke and throws the Emperor down the shaft to kill him, you hear him going, "No!" like that. I don't think that's needed. That's the one thing that annoys me. Now, don't get me wrong, with it being that being there, that one little thing, even though that I don't agree with Lucas on that, I'm willing to tolerate that for a million years to keep the versions that are there, the special edition versions. I'd rather have that no in there then go back to the original cuts, even though that I don't like when Vader screams no. I think they should take that out. But I'd rather live with that than go back to the original uncuts. One of the things that I think, I could go either way, just like I did do with the Han and Greedo scene. The Hayden Christensen being replaced as Anakin's ghost. You remember at the end where Luke comes back on Endor and he sees the spectral forms of Yoda, Obi-Wan, and then his father Anakin. They for the special edition ones, Lucas replaced Hayden Christensen, put him in there. And it does make sense, because if you understand the mythology of the Force, essentially what it's saying is that Anakin had died. When he converted to the dark side, he had actually died. That was the point in which he had died. So when he converted back to the good side and he had physically died, then his spectral form would appear from the time of his youth before he did turn to the dark side. So that does makes sense, and it could go that way. I have no problem. But also, too, I have no problem if they put it back, they decide to put it back and make Sebastian Shaw, who was the one who stood in for Anakin's ghost in the uncut versions. If they go that way, I have no problem. So I could go either way. I'm just saying that having Hayden Christensen there does make sense, according to the mythology. Do you need it? No, but it does make sense, and it's okay. So either way is okay. You can use Hayden Christensen as the ghost of Anakin, or Sebastian Shaw. Either way, that would be fine with me. This is what must stay. The ending victory celebration all over the galaxy. Now, they did have a victory celebration, but like I said, with the Bespin scene and the Mos Eisley scene in the uncuts, it seemed more closed. So the victory scene at the end of Return of the Jedi, with the Ewoks celebrating with the rebels, seem more closed. But when you see the celebration happening all over the galaxy, it sort of reminded you of seeing the scenes in New York City and Washington D.C. and London and Paris after the Germans had surrendered. Celebration, we finally got freedom, the war is over. And that marks the official end of the Galactic Civil War. Because the Emperor is dead, Vader is dead, gone, and the Empire has been crushed, even though in the EU we know that there's still factions of it out there trying to rebuild. But essentially the Empire as it was crushed. And it was the end of the Galactic Civil War. And that the celebration really brings the magic to a close. It gives that finality. That's finally saying that the saga has been completed. And I just don't think the uncut versions do that with just the Ewoks and the Rebels celebrating on Endor. I think you need to see that celebration happening all over the galaxy, which we do, and that needs to stay. In my opinion, I cannot accept going back to the original uncut versions of Return of the Jedi. I want that scene in the special edition versions to be there, to remain there, and remain there as canon. But with that sort of ends my critique of the Fanboys and my defense of the special edition versions of the original trilogy as well as the prequel trilogy. And I will say this. Like I said, I've observed that the Fanboys are fans from the dark side, as a Sith, from the dark side perspective. From the Sith perspective of the dark side. That they're fans of hating George Lucas and everything George Lucas has done with Star Wars after 1983. That's what they're hateful for. And they've been at this for a decade and a half. And now, with the Disney acquisition, it's coming back in its second wave. It's getting its second wave is coming back. And it's resurrecting and becoming more powerful. I don't know how Disney's going to respond to it. I don't know if Disney's going to put... I hope they don't. Because I hope they don't put the originals... They try to put the original uncuts. They just, when I say the original uncuts, I don't mean that those parts that I talked about that I can go, like the Vader screaming no, or making Han shoot first, or putting back the scene with Sebastian Shaw as Anakin's ghost. I'm not talking about that. If they want to do that, that's fine. I can accept that. But if they want to do what the fanboys are trying to do, is just take the versions from 1983, slap them on a Blu-ray disc, and then start selling them. I will not be one of the ones. I will not buy that version. I will vote with my pocketbook. I will not be buying that version. I want to stick with the original, the special edition versions of the original trilogy. And I will even accept. I'm willing to accept Vader screaming no, rather than going back to the original uncut versions from 1983. That's just the way I feel. But my saying is that my hope and prayer is that Disney at least somehow acknowledges George Lucas. I'm not saying he's perfect. I'm saying that they should respect him and his vision for the Star Wars saga. And they should continue doing that some way. Not to say, like I said, they can make some tweaks, like I said, with those things. But if they're going to just go back to the original versions, the original uncut versions from 1983 of the original trilogy, and try to, in the future stories, cut out, almost like try to treat the prequel trilogy as non-canonical, not deal with that at all. Basically disrespecting George Lucas's vision for Star Wars, because I feel that would be a major mistake for Disney. And let me express this for the fanboys that I read online as they're cursing Lucas and cursing everything he did with Star Wars after 1983, all the changes he made to the original trilogy and the prequel and the prequel he did with the prequel trilogy. They're always screaming, "That's not the vision that I had with Star Wars." Well, you know what? You're truly not. You are a fan of hating George Lucas and what he's done with Star Wars after 1983. But the thing is that your original thought with Star Wars is not Star Wars. If you had in mind, like if you thought about, okay, I want to go to Disney World, and you had this image build up what Disney World was, and then when you got there, that was disappointing. And then you start screaming at the Disney CEOs and Walt Disney, screaming, how could Walt Disney build this studio? It's not anything with my vision. Well, guess what? Walt Disney had a vision for his Disney World, Disneyland and Disney World. He had that vision. That's what it is. That's what it's defined by. You had your own vision, which you didn't know that wasn't part of it. So when you go there, you find out you're disappointed. But the fact is your vision is not what Disney World was. Disney World is what Walt Disney had envisioned it to be. Same thing. Lucas has a vision, a whole picture. Think about the whole picture of what Star Wars is. I happen to agree with it, 99% of what he has. That's why I passionately love Star Wars. The fanboys obviously have a different vision. And I'm not sitting there saying that they're all wrong, but I'm sitting there saying that they're wrong about Star Wars. They're not fans of what Star Wars is, according to what George Lucas had envisioned. They're fans of some other genre, of some other franchise. And that's what I don't want to see Star Wars being turned into by Disney. Because, like I said, their fans, what they claim they want Star Wars to go back to, or what they want Star Wars to be for them, is not what Star Wars actually is, because only George Lucas has that right to define what Star Wars is, because he's ultimately the creator. I'm just hoping now, because he doesn't own it, that Lucas doesn't change his vision. That would be a major mistake, the worst mistake ever going. But these fans, these fanboys, since they have an image in their head of what they want Star Wars to be, which is not Star Wars, it's something else. Why don't they go to another franchise, another science fiction franchise, and find something similar to what they're looking for, what they need, or what they want to find, or what their vision is what they want to have? Why don't they go try to find another science fiction franchise that matches up closer to what they want? Because Star Wars does not match up to what they're looking for. And if no franchise exists, if there's no franchise exist out there that matches up to what they want to see, or what they want to see in a science fiction franchises, then they ought to make it up on their own. They're free. This free country. They can make a science fiction franchise up, start writing novels or whatever, and trying to get them published, and see where they go. And maybe they'll make movies out of them or whatever, just like they did with Harry Potter and all the other popular series of novels. They make movies or whatever. You can make up your own franchise that matches what you want to see from a science fiction film. But don't expect Lucas to change his view, because his view, he's the creator of Star Wars, he has that right, and you either agree with it or you disagree with it. If you disagree with it, want to go on, just like I don't agree with Russell Davies on Torchwood, so I go on. And I find other things that I like. I like the classic Doctor Who series or whatever. I stick with that, or, you know. But I don't sit there and curse and try to get and spit venom and try to get people to, you know, try to manipulate George Lucas to change his mind and change his view. It's just asinine. It's insane. And I don't know how Disney. What worries me is if Star Wars and Lucasfilm was still under Lucas, I wouldn't worry. But now it's with a corporation that's only interested in money. So now I'm worried about how they're going to respond. And how they're going to respond. Are they going to respond with the fans just trying to get money? Or are they going to respond with a respect to the saga according to what George Lucas has? I'm not saying that they can't come up with their own stuff and add their own stuff in for their future movies. But be respectful of what George Lucas had envisioned. The prequel trilogy and the special editions of the original trilogy. Be respectful to what's being made. And honor that. Don't change that. Keep that the same. And go on from there. Not to say that you can't go on with add some of your own vision in with the future, the sequel trilogy and all that kind of stuff. But be respectful to the 6-movie saga. And keep that the same as it is today. And don't destroy it. Because if they go with the fans and they try to go back to the original uncuts, which I won't buy, the original uncuts from 1983, and try to phase out the prequel trilogy, and do all this other weird stuff. As I heard rumors that they're doing with, you know, the movies that the independent movies that they're doing, the independent Star Wars movies, that they're going to have in between episodes 7 and 8 and 9. The guys that they got, Disney, from what I'm hearing by rumor, I'm going to wait so I get more information on it before I announce this on a blog or whatever. But I hear rumors that they're prequel haters. And I have no idea why they would hire them, if that be the case. But if that's the case, if worst case scenario comes where they want to go back to the original cuts from 1983 of the original trilogy, phase out the prequel trilogy, go off in some other direction, they're going to change Star Wars so much it's not going to be George Lucas's vision. And I won't be able to, as much as I'm passionately for it, I won't be able to support it anymore. It'll break my heart, and I don't know what I'm going to do, and that's something I'm very worried about and depressed over. I'm just hoping that it's not as bad as I think. But if they do, they will be they will be destroying the single best science fiction saga of all time. You're not gonna ever be able to replace it. I mean, I love Doctor Who because half of my channel is dedicated to Doctor Who. I also love Star Trek and a lot of other science fiction, but nothing compares to Star Wars. Star Wars has always been my number one and always will. Nothing will ever replace it. In my opinion, nothing will ever replace the Star Wars saga, the Star Wars franchise. You destroy that in this generation, you will not be able to appeal to anything else, any other saga. I don't care if it's Star Trek, I don't care what it is, X, Y, Z, whatever you pick. It will never compare to Star Wars. You will be destroying the one and only and the best science fiction franchise, science fiction saga of all time. Now maybe in 100 years from now, long after we're dead, long after our children are dead, and most likely long after our grandchildren are dead, maybe somebody will come along in another century and be a new George Lucas and be able to come up with something that will be able to surpass Star Wars. But not in our generation, not in our lifetime. We will never see a saga like Star Wars ever again in our lifetime. So we better get it right. And Disney better get it right. And the fanboys had better understand that and make a choice. Decide to love what George Lucas' vision of Star Wars, or they have a right. They live in America. You know, we live in a free country. Decide that you hate it, but don't bash it. Don't spit venom and hate. Let those who love it continue to love it and choose to go on. Find something else that you love and enjoy. Don't ruin my enjoyment of it. Don't ruin my enthusiasm. Don't get me depressed and feeling horrible that I love Star Wars as much as I do. because that's wrong. And I can't take that anymore. I really can't. But with that, I think it's best that I end my little rant with that. And I want to thank everyone for watching this video. I hope that whether you agree with me, disagree with me, or in any points, that you can be respectful. Love, give me your comments, but I ask that you be respectful. I will not tolerate hate, spit, and venom, saying go F yourself and hate George Lucas and all this. If you want to disagree, challenge, that's fine. But I ask, be respectful at the same time in your responses. And I'd love to see how you guys respond to what I've shared. But with that, I think I will end this. I want to thank you for watching this blog and this video. I hope that you got something out of it. Keep in mind, look for next month. The next blog hopefully will be on the topic of Doctor Who mythology, theories on time travel, which I hope to have finished sometime early to mid-March. That's my goal. Lord willing, I will complete that goal. But in the meantime, I want to thank you for watching this video. I hope you all have a good day. If you like what you have seen, please subscribe to my channel. That would be most helpful. This way you get all the updates when they come out. And with that, I want to bid everyone a good day again, and may the Force be with you.